Welcome to the Traffic and Transportation Committee of the City of Thousand Oaks. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Welcome. Any person who wishes to speak regarding an item on the agenda or a subject within the city's jurisdiction before in the public comments portion, please fill out a public speaker card with the recording secretary before that portion of the agenda is called. Any person who wishes to speak on a specific agenda item must file a public speaker card before the item is called. Persons addressing the Traffic Commission who are requested to state their name and city of residence for the record. You will have since there's no public comments, and is this public? You said item number 4. Thanks. Okay, I'll get there. Anyway, so public comments, then we will move on. If everyone would please at this time turn off or silence any cell phones, pagers, that kind of thing, we'd appreciate it. Mrs. Bravo, would you take the roll, please?
Chair McKay?
Here.
Vice Chair Lemo? Here. Commissioner Gregory?
Here.
Commissioner McMahon?
Here.
And Commissioner Price? Here. Thank you.
Now we'll get to that secret public comments item number 4. Darrell Reynolds.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Darrell Reynolds, and I reside in the city of Thousand Oaks. I thought tonight, since you're hearing about the bicycle committee, that this was an appropriate time for me to mention the Tour de Cure. And the Tour de Cure, this will be the 3rd year that the city of Thousand Oaks has been involved in it. It's being chaired by Council Member Jackie Irwin, and it is the Diabetes Bicycle Ride. And we're looking for teams. We're looking for even individuals that would like to ride. There's a 5, a 30, and a 60 5-mile ride, and you may register at 1-888-DIABETES, and if you don't know how to spell that, that's DIABETES. And as a diabetic myself, I hope that someday there will be a cure, and we're raising money, so maybe someday there will be a cure. So I hope that people will join us, and it's going to be on Sunday, May 6th.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, did everyone look at the summary notes from March 21st? Any comments, corrections? Okay. We'll now move on to the community meeting. The Bicycle Advisory Team is here to present their report and their safety findings. Kathleen Howry is here for staff.
Thank you, Chair McKay. Hi, I'm Kathy Lowry. I work in the Traffic Division in the Public Works Department for the city. As you're aware, the city's been doing bicycle planning for many years. More recently, in 2005, the Traffic Commission recommended to the City Council adoption of the city's Bicycle Master Plan. At that time, it was adopted. But tonight we're going to be revisiting the Bicycle Master Plan, but specifically looking at bicycle safety improvements. You'll be hearing 3 presentations from members of the Bicycle Safety Team, or as they've been known to be called, the BAT. At the conclusion of the presentations, the Traffic Commission will have the opportunity to discuss the BAT recommendations. Members of the BAT and staff can answer questions you might have regarding their recommendations. I would like to make one comment before the presentations begin. It's really important to know that the BAT's been meeting every month since October. A great deal of time and effort has gone into preparing the presentations you're going to see. Collectively, this is an effort of the Bicycle Advisory Team, and I would like to personally thank all the members of the BAT who have worked really hard to provide the excellent presentations you'll see. Now I'd like to start with introducing Dr. Stanley Stevens. He will begin the presentations tonight by providing an overview of bicycle safety. Did I say your name wrong?
Stephen Stanley.
Stephen Stanley. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Kathy. Commissioners. As Ms. Lowry mentioned, we have been meeting for the last 6 months, and on a recommendation by Councilman Tom Glancy, and due to the unfortunate accident and death of Dr. Glenn Garvin, on September 26, Councilmember Glancy recommended that the BAT committee reconvene, and with the specific idea of reviewing safety issues in the city of Thousand Oaks. And the BAT committee has been meeting for the last 6 months to review bicycling safety, take a look at ingresses and egresses in and out of Thousand Oaks, and make some specific recommendations to you that you can then take to City Council and present to them as far as recommendations to make bicycling safer in our community. First of all, the BAT committee consisted of Kathy Lowry, Jay Spurgeon, Sergeant Tom Bennett, Sandy Bravo, Secretary, Darrell Reynolds, who's in the audience this evening, J.C. Simmons, who's going to be speaking directly after me, David Chambers, a bicyclist and chairperson, Chuck Bankston and Katie Menzies, they're from the Old Cranks Club, Sharon McMahon, who is on the Traffic Commission, Sharon, Jim Biega, Mike Chicky, and myself, Stephen Stanley, bicyclist. As Kathy mentioned, the original master plan was approved by City Council on May 17th, 2005. What we proceeded to do was we used this master plan as a template. And preceding this particular slide, there's going to be some maps that I will show you that will refer to, and it's going to give you a good idea and a picture, a snapshot picture of what's happening with the bicycling paths, problem areas that we found throughout the city, etc. And we're also going to give you, after I make my presentation, we're going to give you a review of what some other cities have done, and then David, our chairperson, is going to outline some recommendations. But first of all, a little bit of information about the city of Thousand Oaks. We all live here. We know it's an ideal climate for outdoor recreation, and certainly an excellent climate for commuter cycling, as well as recreational cycling. Unfortunately, the city itself is divided by two major freeways, right down through pretty much the center of the center of the city. Goes the 101, and intersecting it is the 23. And each one of the roads that intersects those major freeways, there are potential issues with ingress and egress of cycling and motor vehicle traffic, and we'll get to that in a little bit. East-west arterials, Hillcrest, Thousand Oaks Boulevard, Hampshire Road, and the southern portion of Lynn Road as it bends around into Newbury Park and Dos Vientos. And then also we'll take a look at some of the north-south arterials, Northern Lynn Road, Moore Park Road, and Westlake Boulevard. I'm going to move here kind of quickly because a lot of this stuff, being members of the Traffic Commission, you're, I'm sure, aware of. But one of the things you might not be aware of is some of the classifications, and let's get, first of all, some definitions. A Class 1 bike path, I believe there's only 2 of them here in the city of Thousand Oaks, and there's going to be a map that's going to come up and show you in a few minutes. But it's a dedicated path that's separate from the roadways, used only by bicyclists or pedestrians. It can be, as I mentioned, multi-use. Class 2 path is a striped bicycle lane that's located to the right and in the same direction of traffic, and it's not a dedicated lane, but it shares the same roadway, but is clearly marked lane. Class 2 bike path is, by definition, on low-volume roadways that provide shared use with motor vehicles and or identified by bike route signing. And there are sidewalk routes, which you'll see in the maps here in just a minute, that bicyclists may ride on the sidewalk in either direction, but they're required to yield the right-of-way to pedestrians. Okay? And this map might be a little bit difficult to see, but I don't know if we passed out some of the master plans. I know Sharon has a copy of the master plan, and you can certainly get them from the city. This particular map, I believe, is on page 7, and it just shows the existing bike paths. Okay? There are a number of them in the city. I'd like to commend the founding fathers of the city, and certainly the BAT committee that met before, that came up with the master plan and was able to outline these paths and make some recommendations as far as expanding the bikeways here in the city. As I mentioned, the existing bike conditions, major freeways divide the city, and they present obstacles to travel at the intersections. There's always going to be ingress and egress issues that occur. Many bike lanes are not completed throughout the entire traverse, either east-west or north-south in the city, and that's going to be an issue that we're going to address here. And you're going to find, or what we have found, that the major arterial streets handle most of the bicycling movement throughout the city. This is the second map that we're going to talk about, and I apologize, it is difficult to see there. But the red areas, and I'll go through this quickly, are areas where there have been accidents that have been reported. The vast majority of these accidents are reported on the high-trafficked, high-density streets, such as Thousand Oaks Boulevard, Hillcrest Boulevard in the east-west direction, those and Moore Park Road, those three streets tend to have very heavy traffic. They have very heavy incursions of cross traffic through driveways, side streets, business entry and exits. And there are also streets that have sidewalks. And many cyclists in those or on those streets use the sidewalks as for the main thoroughfare or main route of transportation. This is the final map that we're going to talk about today or look at today, and this is simply a map of ideally what the Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3 bike routes throughout the city of Thousand Oaks per the recommendation of the city master plan will one day look like. As I mentioned, we have some recommendations that we're going to make. J.C. Simmons is going to speak next on what other cities have done with their master plan and go from there. Thank you very much. It's all yours. Okay.
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. I'm J.C. Simmons. I'm a longtime avid cyclist in the Conejo Valley. I've lived in the town for 15, 18 years, I guess. I've got about 25,000 miles of riding in the last 10 years. around this town and other places in Southern California. I'm currently the president of the Conejo Valley Cycle Club. I'm also one of the contributing editors to the Bicycle Master Plan. And just to plug my club's ride coming up on May 12th, Cruising the Conejo's coming. We have about 1,200 people coming to Thousand Oaks to ride their bicycles in our lovely town. So what I want to address today is what we didn't just design this stuff in a vacuum. What BAT learned and from others, and resources we checked out were the League of American Bicyclists, which is a national organization of avid cyclists, clubs, and various other interest groups in promoting safe cycling in the country. This is probably the most visible lobbying organization promoting cycling. Heavy pushers of the T21 plan that allowed us to do the master plan originally. Bikes Belong is a similar organization, but it's primarily made up of shop owners and manufacturers. Rails to Trails are concerned with converting old railroad right-of-ways into bike trails. The Thunderhead Alliance is an organization of various coalitions around the country, kind of pushing the same agenda. And the last website here is where the statistics came from for this next presentation, which is, back on the League of American Cyclists, slightly out of order here. League of American Bicyclists, as I said, is a national organization. They promote safe cycling through three areas of interest: education, heavily into education, as I'll present. Cycling is best learned if it's taught. Infrastructure, road improvements, bike racks, parking facilities, signage and markings, and last, enforcement. It's kind of hard to enforce the law if the cyclists really don't know what it is they're supposed to be doing to start with. That's why education is first. Crash types. This comes from the Bike Info. 4 out of 5 serious crashes are not involving cars. 83% are bicycle only. Vast majority of those lost control, flat tires, mechanical failure, or road conditions, road grates, crossing railroad tracks not at a perpendicular angle. They're very slippery, those types of instances. 17% are bicycle to bicycle, either head on or if you overlap wheels and you're riding in a group, you're going down. Dog bite confrontations, a big one in other parts of the country, not so much here because of our strong leash laws and enforcement, and other causes. Now, something to point out on these statistics is the vast majority of bicycle accidents go unreported. Emergency rooms don't count them unless the cyclist actively says that he was involved in an accident. The police don't come to a lot of crashes, especially bicycle-only crashes, because there's not an insurance claim involved. There's not a violation of the vehicle code, but serious injuries. All these numbers represent people that have gone to emergency rooms with injuries big enough to be counted. Motors first bicycle. This is the last 18 or 17% we're looking at. Who's at fault? Wrong side of street, facing traffic. This is the cyclist's fault. You see them all over town here. It was one of the big pushes we've made in the BAT, is constantly harping on, got to get the guys off the sidewalks and off the streets on the wrong side of the road. They think they're riding safely because mom taught them to walk facing traffic. Well, when you're walking, you can jump sideways. When you're on your bicycle, you can't jump sideways. And if you're at 15 miles an hour on a bicycle, the car coming towards you is at 35 miles an hour, you got a closing speed of 50 miles an hour. Where if you're flowing with them, the closing speed is 20 miles an hour. Lots more time to react. Left turn in front of cyclists. This is usually a cyclist. The car is not recognizing that the cyclist is on the through road going the other direction, or the cyclist is in the crosswalk coming off the sidewalk. Another serious problem. Right turn in front of cyclists. We call this a right hook. Again, the cyclist is in the bike lane over next to the curb. He's going through. The car comes up on his left, turns right in front of him because he's turning right. He thinks he has the right of way, or he doesn't realize the cyclist is at 10, 12, 15 miles an hour. Thinks he has room. Happens all the time. And or again, the cyclist coming off the sidewalk into the crosswalk and gets hit. Left turn from right side of road. You'll see cyclists do this. They're riding in the bike lane and they decide to make a left turn, and they turn. Either traffic coming towards them or behind them will catch them. Failure to yield exiting a driveway. You see cyclists come riding out of driveways in front of traffic as if they're invincible. Pretty kind of hard to fathom when you're a serious rider, but you see people do it. And running a stop sign or signal, cyclist's fault. Running a stop sign or signal, automobile's fault. Notice I have them colored keyed to the bicycle's yellow and the car's white. Crash types continued. Opening car door into cyclist path. This is called dooring. Especially if you have a bike path, as we have on Wilbur, several other places, that encourages the cyclist to ride within 3 feet of the car. Big cars, tinted windows, headrests. The cyclist can't see that there's a person in the car. The person in the car opens his door in front of the cyclist, and you've got an accident. Failure to yield, exiting a driveway from the car's point of view, 6%. All others, 5%. And the one that the novice cyclist is concerned about is being hit from the rear. And yet this is less than 5% or 8% of the 17%. So it's a very, very small fraction of the actual serious accidents that involving cars and bicyclists. What can a cyclist do to protect himself? Bright clothing, lights at night, reflectors, and last but not least, be predictable. And that is what we're going to argue about today, is operating your bicycle as if you're a vehicle, obeying the vehicle code. What cyclists can do: wear their helmets. Half the emergency room bicycle reports are head injuries, 85% of the fatalities, and brains don't heal. Keep your brakes in good working order. Do a safety check before you get on your bike for that ride. Wear bright, highly visible clothing. You see most avid cyclists in their spandex. It's usually not soft colors blending with the background. And learn proper road riding and practices, and this comes to the education. Why formal education? Because the vehicle code says bicycles are vehicles. Simply knowing how to ride a bike is not the same as knowing how to operate one safely and legally. Formal bicycle training. If you learn it on your own, just going out and riding, the League of American Bicyclists says that's take you about 10 to 20 years and 50,000 miles to get confident. Ride with a club, cut it down to 2 years and 5,000 miles. And for those of you that think 5,000 miles is a lot of miles, that's 50 miles a week, which is a couple of recreational rides, or commuting 10 miles 5 days a week. Studying books and magazines, you cut it down to a year, 2,500 miles, or you can go to some kind of formal class with classroom practice and 3 to 6 months of practice, 8 to 1,000 miles, and you're a fairly competent cyclist. League of American Cyclists Bike Education Program. They have set a curriculum for adults and children taught across the United States by certified League of Cycling instructors, of which I am one. LAB's Bike Ed program. Bike One is a 9-hour classroom and ride practice session for adults and 14 years old and older. Then there's a Bike 2 course, which adds on to the course 1, which is for avid cyclists. This teaches pace line, more serious competitive riding, other aspects, competitive cycle choicing, that kind of thing. Commuting, there's a commuting program that adds on to the Bike One, 3-hour add-on, special things on what a commuter bike should look like, luggage racks, lights, heavier duty tires. There's a motorist program, 3-hour add-on to a driver education curriculum teaching motorists what cyclists should be doing if they're obeying the law correctly. There's a Kids 1 instruction for helping parents learn how to teach their kids how to ride, and a Bike 2, which is designed for 7th and 8th graders, the junior high that are getting ready to move off the school commute into serious street riding. We also reached out to California Resources, California Bicycle Coalition. They are much like the League, except they're based in Sacramento. I know Casey Butler, who's the head of that, and I have a little something that he and I were just talking about. I'll bring up a little later. San Francisco Bicycle Coalition. San Francisco, as we'll see, is a very active city in cycling. You've probably heard of Critical Mass, rides they have once a month. Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition. Santa Barbara's been very active in getting bicycling going, and the city of Davis. Going back to the League, they have a program of bicycle-friendly communities. This is a way of evaluating communities, what they're doing to make safe cycling, and they award various rates of commendation for those people that are addressing the needs of cyclists. 58 awards to date. There's only one platinum, and that's Davis, California. And we'll see about Davis. San Francisco is a gold. It's one of the 7. So is Palo Alto. Santa Barbara is a silver, along with Folsom. I believe Morgan Hills just joined them. And there's 40 bronze awarded, 7 of them Californian. And there's another 11 honorable mentions. Davis, they got more bicycles than cars. Of course, they have a university, which makes a big help. They have full 2-time bike coordinators on staff, with staff, and they have 2 bicycle advisory committees, one tied to the city, one tied to the campus. They have bike lanes on 95% of their arterials. They have 27 different grade separations throughout the city between bicycles and cars. And they spent $14 million on several infrastructures, separate bicycle undercrossing of one major artery and separate bicycle overcrossing of the I-80. And they just completed that here recently. San Francisco, committed to working with on bike lanes. Hard fight. Bicyclists finally got access to the Broadway Tunnel, which separated North Beach from the west side of the northern city. Bicycle access on BART, bike racks on BART and on buses. They also have an active program in installing sharrows, which Dave will talk about. They also have a person that is a bicycle coordinator on staff. Back to the League again on LCI, the California Bicycle Coalition. Talking with Casey Butler, he says he has money to fund a program of teaching an LCI class, possibly here in Thousand Oaks, which would pay to get 8 additional LCIs in the Southern California area here. More people could attend the course. And they have an active Bike to Work program. The reason they're funding this is they have a big effort on Bike to Work, and part of the Bike to Work is LCIs going out to companies with a 1-hour lecture on how to use your bicycle as a commuting vehicle. And that is me. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Dave Chambers, our chairman, avid commuting cyclist, and he will finish up with our recommendations for here in Thousand Oaks.
Thank you. My name is Dave Chambers. I'm a recreational cyclist and a commuter. I'm lived in Thousand Oaks for about 25 years, and I bike bike to work every day, 15 miles a day round trip. It's been my pleasure to do that from about near Dover and Hendricks over to the Westlake, actually, over Lindero Canyon and Thousand Oaks Boulevard every day, rain or shine. And I can say that Thousand Oaks is a wonderful town to ride a bike in. really nice wide roads, well maintained compared to other cities I've cycled in, and certainly other places I've talked to cyclists. Speed limits are fairly well. You're going to find this strange, but speed limits are fairly well followed. The drivers are relatively safe, cautious, and considerate of cyclists. So thumbs up already for creating that kind of environment. Upon which we can, I think, only improve. When I was invited to join this team, my primary route has been to stay away from Thousand Oaks Boulevard. I had kind of a negative impression of Thousand Oaks Boulevard as a place to ride, and I ride Hillcrest to get across the city east to west. And so when I came to the first meeting and I saw the heat map that showed the frequency of injuries on Thousand Oaks Boulevard, I decided to switch. And so I switched to Thousand Oaks Boulevard and cycled it from October to March, and still about half my commutes now, morning and night, morning and night, every day. As well as we do a lot of our shopping on the weekends. We get out on our tandem and we ride up and down Thousand Oaks Boulevard and hit the stores. And pick up, flowers at Trader Joe's and whatever else we need to pick up. We always think of something. And I have to say that I like cycling on Thousand Oaks Boulevard. It's actually has benefits over Hillcrest as a place to cycle. The things that make thoroughfares safe for cars also tend to make them safe for bicycles as well. And I found it to be a pleasant experience. So there's no reason to turn away from Thousand Oaks Boulevard as being too dangerous or or not a good place to cycle. It has all the potential of being just fine. I can find the right. There we go. So what did we recommend? Well, what did the City Council and the Traffic Commission ask us to do? Or asked to research bicycle safety, promote safety through bicycle education programs, and prioritize the 2005 Bicycle Facilities Master Plan. And I think that one of the ideas that was thought up front was there must be something in the master plan that will help us improve safety in Thousand Oaks. What are those things? We'll bring them up at the top. And this was a good plan. And I think we came back with a little bit of a twist on that, which was, no, the plan's fine. There's nothing in particular to pull up. You can't pull everything up. I mean, essentially, and we don't want a quick job. I mean, we could come back and say, well, there are a lot of injuries on Teal Boulevard, so put your bike lane on Teal Boulevard right away. But really, that you just don't want to slap a bike lane on Thousand Oaks Boulevard without considering parking issues, width of the roadway. There are long-term planning issues involved in that. So our thought instead, or I think as we discussed it, the approach came about was to let's deal with the specific safety issues that we have, looking at the injury map. Where are the injuries? What can we do now, today, to correct those, perhaps even with interim measures, and come back and then on a careful and considered approach, come in and put in the Class 2 bike lanes that are anticipated by the Bicycle Facility Master Plan. So a lot of our recommendations are in addition to. So we like the plan, additional things we'd like to do. So a lot of hard work went into the plan. Some of the same people who were on the team that put together the plan were on our team, and it's fine. It does a good job of identifying where additional bicycle facilities need to be. So first let's talk about some interim measures to deal with some of the safety issues we found. Just briefly, why even have bicycle facilities, and what do bicycle facilities have to do with safety? Here's a study that shows the effect of, basically crash rates for facilities, facilities with bicycle facilities or without. And the on-street bike lanes or signed bike routes, which are the two major tools that we have to improve bicycling safety, are at the top of the list with the lowest the lowest crash rates. So, I mean, this is it. This is what the study shows. Now, different studies show different numbers all the time. It depends on how you select your cyclists. But the studies tend to show that streets with bike lanes and bike routes are safer. Why is that? There's nothing magic about a stripe of paint or a sign. What it does is it discourages unsafe riding behaviors by cyclists as much as anything else. The cyclist feels more secure riding in a bike lane. He would be just as safe probably in that same position on the roadway without a bike lane. But he is definitely safer than what was the behavior replaced. Replaced perhaps someone who's riding on the sidewalk or someone who was riding the wrong direction. If we can change that behavior to one where he or she feels comfortable effectively riding something closer to the rules of the road, then you've exchanged unsafe behavior with a safe behavior and improved the safety. So that's why I think these facilities float to the top, and I think that's why they're a good idea. Stephen covered this right away, but this covers the signage basically. Mostly in the city we're looking at Class 2 bike lanes versus Class 3 bike routes. Mostly the master plan calls for Class 2 bike lanes to be implemented along all the many major arterials and collectors. Class 3 bike routes are something I want to bring up as an interim measure that we can use until bike lanes can be implemented in some of these locations. The bike lane has a separate lane, and bike route's just an ordinary road. Stephen's presentation indicated that another difference is that high volume versus low volume. That's how some communities do implement it, but there's no requirement for a bike route to have a lower volume than a bike lane. A bike route is simply a designation of where it's a designation that's free for the city to use to help cyclists know where they can ride. Virtually any road or street can be a bike route, except for like a freeway, even some freeways. So what do we want to do? We've got some, in addition, and we'll be talking about this, there are sort of vanilla Class 3 bike routes that you can essentially implement by just throwing up a bike route sign. But we want to do some things within Thousand Oaks that will specifically address some of the specific safety issues we have in Thousand Oaks. So we're going to be talking about sharrows. And those are a fairly recent development. Well, a form of sharrows has been used in Europe and the United States for the past decade or so, but there have been a real push to implement them in California, and some exciting studies that have been done to show that they're actually a good idea. And also some additional signage for lanes or roads where we can't do sharrows. That will the combination of these things really enhance the safety and the usability of Class 3 bike routes, which in turn will allow us to use them as interim measures until bike lanes can be implemented. So what does a sharrow look like? Here are a few pictures. It's essentially it's a bicycle with a couple of chevrons over the top of it. The chevrons point in the direction the cyclist is to travel. And their initial purpose, at least in the study that produced this particular symbol, which was done up in San Francisco, the specific safety problem they were trying to address were doorings. That was a big problem for them. They wanted something that helped the cyclist ride outside the door zone. As JC implemented, it's a significant source of injuries, but not the most important one, but a significant one. So here would be, through the magic of Photoshop, here's a sharrow painted onto Thousand Oaks Boulevard near, I think that's the connector coming off the 23, southbound 23. Showing, and that's approximately to scale. Typically, where are sharrows, Caltrans has guidance as to where sharrows can go. If a street has no bike lane, has a speed limit up to 35 miles an hour, and has on-street parallel parking, that's a place where sharrows are, we think, a good idea. You put them 13 feet out from the curb. Caltrans says 11-foot minimum. Several bicycle advocacy organizations are recommending that that's a little small, that's a little tight. You put one after each intersection, and then at 250-foot intervals thereafter as a guideline. Here's a typical implementation, and the Sharrows are not to scale. But if I'd made them to scale, you wouldn't see them. This is in front of the Auto Mall on Thousand Oaks Boulevard, and you can see basically on the eastbound portion there, starting off to your left. You have one right after the intersection, and then that illustrates what would be about a 250-foot interval associated with the bike route sign, probably right after the intersection, to help people also know that this is a bike route. So that's about the spacing, and you can see, you picture, well, a ride as I do Thousand Oaks Boulevard every day, and the safe place to ride is outside the door zone, and the Sharrow really pretty much designates where that location is. Probably the only place, actually, after I put this in the slide and after I've been thinking about it for some time, the only place I've actually almost gotten doored in Thousand Oaks in all my commuting has been right on that block. It was just a coincidence. I picked it right in front of the Auto Mall. So, but what happened when San Francisco did an actually very formal study of Sharrows? How does that exact symbol work? They had some, they were trying to increase the distance between the cyclist and the parked car. And indeed, it increased the distance by 8 inches from the cyclist to the parked car average distances. When a passing car is putting pressure on the cyclist, he's closer, tends to come closer to the parked car. The Sharrows help moderately, 3 inches. Here where they started to get some surprises. Passing car to cyclist. The car that would be putting pressure on the cyclist before Sharrows was 2 foot 7 inches away, after 4 foot 10. So over 2 foot of additional space in their study in several locations in San Francisco between the car and the cyclist. That's a real encouragement for cyclists to maintain a safe position in the roadway. And then there's a benefit to the people getting in and out of their cars. They gained a foot between passing cars just to the parked car without a cyclist present. Also, they found that it reduced sidewalk cyclists and it reduced wrong-way cyclists. It's much less of a problem for them, at least in the locations where they did the studies for Sharrows. They don't have the prevalence of sidewalk cyclists that we do in particular, but they did find that there was a significant reduction there as well. So these are all good things. Typical locations, T.O. Boulevard is clearly the #1 location for this. Roughly, between Moorpark Road and Westlake Boulevard, in both directions. There are a couple other places that are hot spots on the injury map. Avenue de los Arbales between Moorpark and State Route 23 has the same speed limit. Qualifies basically. A shorter stretch, Hodenkamp between T.O. Boulevard and Wilbur. Actually, a number of accidents on Hodenkamp right there on the injury map. And then Gainsborough as well. Not a lot of locations because of the speed limit requirement. When we look at where the injuries are, say on Hillcrest, speed limit's over 35. It's basically outside the guidelines. Now, there are advocacy organizations that are pushing to, they like the Sharrow. They're pushing to take the Sharrow out of a fairly narrow implementation band that Caltrans has selected to say, let's put it on higher speed limits, let's get rid of the parking requirement, let's put it in employ it elsewhere. And indeed, San Francisco has actually done that. I guess they're the 800-pound gorilla in that particular arena. They just decided to go over and beyond Caltrans requirements. What the legal ramifications are, that I have no idea. But they've gone beyond that and started putting Sharrows on streets that don't have on-street parking. Now, their speed limit citywide is 25 miles an hour, I believe, so they don't. It's a different kind of problem than we would be facing. But believe me, this is being looked at, and there are being recommendations made, which at the glacial speed at which the Caltrans adopts new standards, we may see in our lifetimes. The other tool that we have to improve bike routes where we can't put Sharrows are some enhanced signage on a bike route. This is where basically the bike lanes are too narrow, or the outside lane is too narrow to share with a car. or they're the outside lane with cars parked on the street cause the lane to be too narrow to be shared with a passing automobile. The original signage that was adopted for this was share the road, but share the road is really, it actually turned out to be a completely ambiguous message, and actually cyclists get a negative feedback from 1 out of every 1,000 motorists to say, you get off the road, share the road, man, because the motorists don't actually see that as an unambiguous message that they should be sharing the road with the cyclist. So this is, I don't think could be, this message cannot be misinterpreted, I'm confident. And it's being implemented in selected places in Southern California. And there are two different flavors of the sign here. So no bike lane, narrow outside lane, typically 12 foot or less. The one that would be too narrow to share with a car, comfortably with a car. If you're out far enough from the curb to not be hitting the curb or the gutter, and the car can't pass you with about 3 foot tends to be the number that's thrown around as a safe passing distance, then it's too narrow. Too narrow. You need to have the use of the full lane. And then no on-street parking or speed limit. It's greater than 35 miles an hour. It's not eligible for sharrows, so this is our second choice. Typical locations: Lynn Road between Hillcrest and Avenue de los Obelis, Hillcrest between Lynn and Moore Park, in front of the Oaks Mall and the Jan's Mall there, and then Moore Park between 101 and Wilbur. If is another location that would be typical of this, where this could benefit from this kind of signage. Here's an example. Hillcrest, this is in front of the Oaks Mall roughly. You can see basically 3 roughly equal sized lanes. That outside lane is a 12-foot lane. If there's a cyclist in that lane, a car is going to have to go around them and put the left wheel over into the middle lane to get around the cyclist safely. And then another option, the places where we have wide outside lanes but there's on-street parking. This would be would be Hillcrest between Moore Park and Duesenberg. Here's an example. Not a lot of parked cars in this example. I guess, I mean, when these aerial shots were taken of this section, there just weren't a lot of cars parked. But you can see over to the right side of a little bit, case where it's a nice wide outside lane except for the cars. When there are cars parked there, as there are on the upper portion of the right upper portion of the slide, there's not room to share what's left of the lane with a car. So it's the same scenario. And because of the higher speed limit, we can't put a sharrow. So in addition to that, so basically, to recap, all the routes actually that were listed there as sample locations for these bike routes are listed in the bike plan as Class 2 desired locations for Class 2 bike lanes. Most of them are in the 6 to 20 year section of that plan. We're saying, fine, they're in the plan. The plan was well thought out, but let's bring in something in the interim until bike lanes. Bike lanes are still preferred, and but we can do something in the interim to improve the safety. There's some additional things we can do. One of the things where we did find that we probably would change the plan was where the plan calls for bike lanes that go through door zones. We feel that a sharrow bike route is generally better. So we have a couple door zone bike lanes in the city now, a few. One is Wilbur Drive between Moore Park and Hodenkamp. Yeah, so take them out of the master, replace the master plan or modify the master plan to use sharrows instead of door zone bike lanes. The one that's a higher priority, I think, is the Wilbur Drive, because there are more injuries on Wilbur Drive than there are in these other locations, which tend to be more of they're collector roads. They're kind of residential. The traffic doesn't seem to be really high in some of these other locations. It's probably less of a priority. Here's an example of a door zone bike lane. This is Wilbur between Moore Park and Hodenkamp. If you blow it up and imagine a cyclist riding, a cyclist may think they're doing really good in riding down the center of the lane. A cautious cyclist or a new cyclist might be actually even shading to the right of the bicycle lane just to stay away from the passing cars. And they're clearly in the door zone for vehicles. And this is tragically, this was a fatality in Boston for a door zone bike lane. And if you picture this scenario, this is exactly what we have in several places in the city. Most injuries related to doorings in door zone bike lanes come from collision with the door. Most fatalities come from a temporary, well, I won't call it successful, it wasn't successful here, where the cyclist swerves out from the door without time to safely merge with on traffic and comes under the wheels of a car. So there's things we can do to help that, and so we should. What are some of the other recommendations? Continue the conversion to video detectors. We've really had reports of really spotty performance with the inductive loop detectors that the city's had, and we know the city's converting to video detectors, which seem to offer more opportunity for detecting cyclists at traffic signals. There's a lot of voodoo and black magic that cyclists have for when they come to traffic signals. If you kind of shade to the left, shade to the right, turn your bicycle sideways, and put your foot down if it has a metal cleat, and it's really actually more than we ask of automobile drivers. And so I think it's better if we can just get the detection equipment to work for all the vehicles. And the BAT team has provided a list of additionally kind of asked cyclists from the different clubs who were represented on the team to give their list of video detector or of intersections where automatic detection of whatever type is in place is not working, and that's been provided to the city. Bicycle lane position indicators are useful to help cyclists know where to put their bike, where they'll be detected. One problem so these can be very useful, and we're recommending these as well as signalized intersections to help the cyclists know where to line up to trigger the light. Here's what the cyclists need to do as they come up to an intersection. They need to get into the lane that represents where they're going. If there's a right turn lane, it's fine for them to stay in the right turn lane. If they're in if they plan to go through the intersection, though, they really don't want to be hugging the right curb. They need to get out in that through lane, and a bicycle lane indicator can give them a little bit more confidence to get out there and do that. That actually improves their safety, especially with competition or conflict with where they want to go straight, but they're competing or conflicting with traffic that wants to turn right. There's just on Saturdays, it's just sad to see. You basically watch intersections and you just have a cluster of cyclists over to the right, and you have this sort of like a contest, or just like, no, I'll go, no, you go, between the cars and the bikes that are simply reduced by helping the cyclist to get out into a through position. So fewer right hooks, and not hopefully reduce going straight through the right turn lane. Sidewalk cycling, well, clearly we're hoping that the bicycle infrastructures as implemented will encourage sidewalk cyclists to get off the sidewalk and get on the street where it's safer. That's what we're really hoping, but we are asking the city to observe that, watch that, and locations where we've implemented bicycle facilities, or if sidewalk riding is not reduced, to consider additional measures. There may be some signage that we can put up to discourage cycling on sidewalks. The state also allows municipalities to make their own rules regarding cycling on sidewalks, and some cities have some cities have implemented restrictions against riding in business districts on sidewalks. So those are their options. We're not making a specific recommendation. We're just saying if the bicycle facilities on Thousand Oaks Boulevards, for instance, we find that there's still significant rate of sidewalk cycling and injuries coming from those riders, then don't stop. You gotta look at additional measures. And when we get to outreach and education, we'll talk more about that. Pedestrians and bike lanes, walking or jogging the bike lanes. This can be dangerous for the cyclists and the pedestrians. It's illegal if there's a sidewalk available. So we're making just a recommendation as well to look into where this is happening in the city in great frequency, and whether sort of additional signage might be appropriate or additional enforcement at those locations where that might be maybe more of an issue. This came from the public meeting, I believe, an indication that there was some congestion and some concern about cyclist safety at recreational trailheads. And I think that's a really good idea. You have cyclists that are the mountain bikers typically who bring their bike to the trailhead, and they're getting them off the back of the bike and getting ready to ride, and cars are arriving and coming and going, and maybe all that activity wasn't anticipated in the design of the actual roads going by, or that maybe we should review those to see if there's we can reduce the possibility of an accident in near one of those trailheads. One of the danger points, getting out of this town can be kind of dangerous. Trail roads is outside of city of Thousand Oaks jurisdiction, but Moorpark Road in the Norwegian Grade largely is not, or is at least partially is within Thousand Oaks. There is a bypass that's been identified. I guess there are issues with getting that approved. I know the city's working to get that worked out, and we're recommending that we get this worked out so the cyclists can use this Reed Road, Olson Road bypass to get around the Norwegian Grade. I would have preferred to give you a full list of bike lanes in Thousand Oaks that don't meet the standards, and the way I just said that implies there's a long list. There isn't. I just haven't had a chance to get out and look at them all. We came upon this idea late in the day, so we couldn't send out troops to check them all out. I know there's at least one bike lane that is not implemented to Caltrans standards related to, there's specific issues related to how wide they need to be, how far they need to be from the curb, and how the width is affected by the presence or absence of a gutter, how they're supposed to be stenciled. And in the actual written report to the Traffic Commission, we list a location on Moorpark Road, at least one, but I think just basically asking, since that one has gotten onto pavement somehow, asking for them all to be reviewed to make sure they're complying to standards. The one, it was southbound on Moorpark Road, south of Avenida de las Flores, I believe. Now, the other thing is that the bicycle safety, the facility master plan specified a number of different opportunities for outreach and education, but we want to bring those up in terms of priority and come up with more specific plans for implementing them. It seems like every bicycle master plan I've read it starts out, and so have we here, with infrastructure. What can we do with paint and signs and maybe concrete to build better facilities for cyclists? And then outreach and education is always like the last part of it. Oh yeah, what we really ought to do is it would be really nice if the motorists all knew the law better and the cyclists all knew the law better. There are a lot of things that are just sort of pitched over to say, I wish we could make this so also, but we're going to have to take, I think, more specific measures to deal with some of the safety issues we have in town. What would we, if we could tell cyclists anything we could, what would we do? Tell them, we'd say don't ride on the sidewalk, follow the rules of the road. share the roadway with motor vehicles, it's fine to do. Use proper equipment at night, wear a helmet, and it's safe and fun to do that. I was standing outside a traffic commission meeting a couple months ago, and I had ridden my bike up, and someone said, "Oh, I could never ride that. It would be way too dangerous to ride my bicycle on the streets here. I like mountain biking though." And I just thought, well, the injury rate on mountain biking is about 20 times road biking. So it's like saying, I don't like riding in planes, so I jump out of them with a parachute or something. It's just the comparison in safety is incredible. I'd like to do some mountain biking too, but people have an idea that it's unsafe, and it's really actually it's safe to ride. It's safe to ride on the streets. What would we teach motorists if we could? Cyclists belong on the roadway. They have the same rights as motor vehicles. And we'd also like to let motorists know that it's safe and fun to ride a bike. And, if we could, have motorists feel that they could ride a bike as well, there's nothing wrong with that. That would be terrific. So what can we do? First of all, we're going to talk about sort of some handouts, and then we're going to talk about where those handouts could go. These outreach materials, we have a couple main things that came up with as possibilities. One is a City of Thousand Oaks bike map. And this was inspired by one city. I just skip ahead a little bit. You're not going to be able to read this, obviously. But Mountain View had a single-page handout. This was designed as a fold-up. They made the mistake of putting every residential street on this map, which is not necessary. But essentially, a map on the front, rules of the road in English and Spanish, very important, in English and Spanish on the back. This was also a good example because actually the rules of the road were actually pretty good rules of the road. They were correct rules of the road. And I have samples of that. I've provided it to the staff, and it's on the Mountain View website as well as an example for what can be implemented in this regard. It's just a tool for communicating with cyclists in the city. Single page, arterials and collectors at least, highlighting bike infrastructure, but not leaving off roads that don't have bike infrastructure. In other words, if I have a bike and I have this map, I can get from point A to point B. I don't really expect to have a bike lane from my driveway or my point of residence all the way to where I'm going. I just want to see where there's bike infrastructure and what other roads I might take to get there. English and Spanish is very important also. Another thing is we specifically need some outreach to Hispanic cyclists. A lot of our sidewalk cyclists are Hispanic. And the Federal Highway Administration has actually spent a lot of time working this out. This is a problem in a lot of cities, sidewalk riding that is. And they did some focus groups. They worked with these riders and came up with a program which I think that we could grab and use, which is specifically to communicate issues related to issues of bicycle safety to Hispanic cyclists. And this is really important as well. It's bilingual. You can go out to English-speaking riders as well. How can we get this information out to Hispanic cyclists? One important, if we look at where a lot of the utility riders in Thousand Oaks, if you look on Thousand Oaks Boulevard, where they're going to employers that are on Thousand Oaks Boulevard. No surprise. And a good way to getting to those cyclists that we think are through the employers, to basically ask the employers to, as part of a new employee orientation, here's a bike map. Here's a brochure on riding safely in Thousand Oaks. Here's a coupon and to help them get a helmet or lights, maybe a tune-up, so that they get their employers started or get their employees started. The employers don't want their employees to have accidents. Obviously, they have a vested interest in getting their employees to work safely. So. And we think the employees will take that kind of recommendation from employers hopefully strongly. New tenants, if we work with some of the apartment owners, landlords, to hand out information with new tenants in the area as well. That would be another way to get to them, as well as bicycle shops, supermarkets, buses. You can read it as well as I can. But just as many ways as possible to get information out to cyclists. Through schools as well, getting bicycle safety information into student orientation materials, so that this stuff, at least some students will read it. Some of this material sometimes makes it home. We're going to talk a little bit more about kids training, Kids 2 training, but we can recruit for. We're hoping to have some sponsored kids training, as well as adult training. Safe Routes to School program. I don't want to just throw these things out. What I'm actually listing are things that need to be developed, but we're actually asking for specific city resource to develop these programs. We can't tell you how to develop the program. It's going to take hours to work on that, or hours and days to work with the school, for instance, to see what are you doing with your. There are lots of schools that have Safe Routes to School programs. What is the cycling component? How do you feel about cyclists coming to your school? Help them work out a safe route. I mean, that's a huge labor-intensive task to do that, and we're not underestimating the amount of time that will take. So, but we're not just tossing this out as an idea. We're tossing out as something, just as for all these ideas, tossing it something that really could well be done by the city. They work with youth organizations as well to get this information out. But it's really a broadcast to try to get information out by as many avenues as possible. We can outreach to cyclists in general, recreation cyclists as well, through street fairs, Cruising the Caneo Valley Days, a booth, for instance, at Cruising the Caneo, where the cyclists form up to hand out a bike map and a bike safety brochure would be big. The Kiwanis is already doing an annual bicycle safety event, an annual bike rodeo, and we're recommending that the city see if they can partner with Kiwanis to make that a bigger and better event. And the idea was suggested, and I think it's a great one, to make that in honor of Glen Garvin as a sort of a memorial event. One way we can get safer cyclists on the streets is to put safer cyclists on the streets, literally through training. Some cities are starting to do this now. This is something that Santa Barbara, working with the Santa Barbara Cycling Advocate organization up there as well, is actually getting into training. What percentage of cyclists in Thousand Oaks could you ever expect to get formal training? Wow, maybe 1%, maybe less. But the more good examples are out on the road, the more likely it will be that others who haven't had the training can see that that's a way that you can ride, that's a good way to do it. This kind of emulation is especially good, I think, in cycling clubs, but it can't hurt for just in general. In order to train instructors, in order to train cyclists, you need instructors. And as JC has indicated, the League of American Bicyclists is sort of the gold standard for cycling instructors. And one way we can start is by having a certain number of sponsorships each year, or for the city to offer a scholarship or arrange training for new instructors, who can then provide training for as many cyclists as the city, again, is willing to sponsor. Now, I'm not saying the city has to, saying the city's got they're just opening up the wallet and peeling off bills here to pay for this stuff. The city may wish to work with civic organizations or other organizations, and there may be who knows how many kinds of funding programs to fund this kind of program. But I think the city has to take a lead role. The city sort of owns the problem, essentially, of bicycle safety in Thousand Oaks, and the city has to take a lead role to get it done. This is going out then to get as many adults and kids as possible through cyclist training. Okay, I'll try to speed things up a little bit. And we're almost done anyway. We need better outreach to cycling advocates, quarterly meetings between the city staff and cycling advocates. One of the things we found as we came back to visit the master plan is it's kind of hard figuring out what had been done since the master plan had been approved, or what the schedule was to implement it. And there has to be better communication of that. We would like to have a bicycling website that can give more information to Thousand Oaks cyclists, with access to the bike maps that will be developed, the training that we'd like to have provided or sponsored by the city, and other information related of interest to cyclists. Access to the master plan, access to some place where we can see what's happened so far and what is planned for bicycle facilities. We're also recommending, all of this is going to take some work, and we're recommending a staff position on the city, a bicycle advocate coordinator, with a variety of duties that this list is in the written report. I won't read them all, but essentially there's a lot of outreach involved in getting this done. Talking to cycling advocates, trying to get the educational material out to cyclists, working with civic organizations, community organizations to specifically address safety problems. Those are a lot of staff hours, and it's kind of a specific skill as well in terms of understanding exactly what the goal is in terms of safe cycling. So, thus a position specifically for this purpose. And those are the recommendations. That's it.
Thank you very much. That was a huge amount of work and well presented, so thank you for that. Are there any questions, commissioners? Nothing?
I've got a ton of questions. Where do we start? How about, let's just get them rolling. And first, I'd like to ask Sergeant Bennett some questions. Currently, right now, do we ticket cyclists for infractions?
Excuse me, Rick, this is Sergeant Kenny.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Nonetheless, does the Thousand Oaks Police ticket cyclists for infractions to rules of the road? Okay. It was only last week, and I kind of slowed down because when I passed Dr. Stanley, I had a swarm of bicyclists come out of nowhere and just cross over 3 lanes of road. And so the one thing I want to applaud you on is recognizing that there are a lot of cyclists who really don't know what the rules of the road are. And the biggest mistake is the ones wearing cycling outfits seem to have more of a challenge than those who don't. I would say that since I've been a little bit paying a lot more attention since the tragedy with Glenn, in that 6-month period, I've never seen one driver crash a stop sign. And I quit counting at 6 cyclists crashing stop signs. So I think more so than anything else you've told us today, I think that you realize what the challenge is out there. But just from a comment standpoint, okay, forget the comment then. I'll give you the comment later. Other questions? Do we have any statistics that show us what percentage of our citizens are bike riders, and in towns where you've made things safer, does that encourage more people to get involved? And are there any kind of statistics out there I think Berkeley is a town that I've watched over the last couple of years where they just seem to have bicyclists blooming.
When the bicycle master plan was developed, there was an estimate about 2% of the population in Thousand Oaks bicycles, which is consistent with our terrain and our climate. But it's not a lot for our city of its size. But that's the answer to the first part of your question, which I think would lead to, if you have more bicycling opportunities, you'd have a higher percentage of people bicycling.
Do we have any kind of numbers from cities, not really similar in size, but cities who have gone and taken some extra steps to create a safer environment, where over a couple of years they've increased their percentage of citizens using bikes by any particular amount? Is that a statistic that even exists?
It's not necessarily a statistic, but part of JC's presentation where he was talking about the cities that have received these awards, the platinum, gold, and silver, as they've added more bicycling facilities, they've had an increase in bicycle ridership. So I think there's, just from looking at those type of cities, yes, it does increase.
Do we have any comparative numbers of the accidents that take place with the implementation of bike lanes versus when you go with a bike route? And I'll tell you the reason for my question. What I'm more concerned about than anything else is an interim measure, even if it's an interim measure that you feel could take 6 months. I wonder if there'd be more accidents by going back and forth.
I think the statistics show that if you have bike facilities on the street, it takes people off the sidewalks, then that decreases the number of accidents, because our highest accidents are on the sidewalks. So providing more bike lanes on the street or sharrows, that would, in essence, decrease the number of accidents from the sidewalks, because that's where most of the accidents happen.
Okay, thank you.
Since we're educating ourselves on a couple of things, I was curious, is there an actual law against, well, let me rephrase this. What is the current helmet requirements for adults? I know children know because parents remind them, number one. Number two, is there also any requirements for reflectors and or lights on bikes at night?
Yes to your last two questions, but I'll deal with the first one. Any bicyclist under the age of 18 years old is required to wear a bicycle helmet when operating a bicycle. That also includes any passengers that are also under that age. In other words, you see a lot of bicycles with car seats, I guess would be the best way to put it, on the back. The passengers there also have to have helmets. As far as the lighting requirements, there are specific lighting and reflector requirements that are in the vehicle code that state that you have to have reflectors, both that can be illuminated from the side. Those are usually found on the wheels themselves, and reflectors for the front and back, and those are usually found on some of the standard pedals. They are required to, at night, have a light that will make them visible for a distance of at least 50 feet in front of them, and they're required to have a red reflector or some type of reflector from the rear also. Did that answer all your questions?
Yes.
Okay.
So just my observation, that is the closest closest I've ever come to an accident was someone riding at night that you could literally not see. So I was just curious about that.
One of the things that was brought up many times during these committee meetings was the Hispanic commuters. They do not want to call attention to themselves, so they ride without lights, without reflectors, in dark sweatshirts, putting themselves at an enormous danger and others. And so that's where the implementation of these education programs is so important. So I just want to add that.
We don't have any public speakers tonight, so at this point, I will close the community meeting, and then we can get to our discussion. Excuse me. Just state your name. You can fill a speaker card out afterwards if you would. Excuse me. Just.
They're up there. Apparently, we do have somebody that would like to speak. They'll need to fill out a speaker card.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to talk about the reflectors. Part of the bicycle LCI program was a video of a lot of different things with bicycles. But one is a car going down the road. A bicycle comes across in front of him with side reflectors on, and the reflectors show up beautifully right in front of the car. But he's invisible when he's off to the side, and he's invisible when he disappears to the other side. And you take one look at that and you go, I need a light. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give him a minute to fill out his card. Thank you. We have a public speaker. You have 5 minutes. I'll let you state your name for the record.
I currently live now in Newbury Park, California.
Do you mind stating your name again? I didn't have the mic turned on.
It's Radic Perez, P-A-R-E-Z. I came to the last meeting, the BAT meeting, last month, and I discussed an issue regarding specifically the pedestrians within the bicycle lanes, Class 2 bicycle lanes, specifically around Westlake Lake. It continues, has been, and continues to be a very hazardous situation, and there are several reasons for that. The reason I'm even here was because my father got doored once. That was a separate incident in LA County, but back in July of 2006, my mom was involved in a injury crash involving a pedestrian that was occupying that bicycle lane. And just to give you a little background on myself, I'm a former state trooper, worked for the Colorado State Police for 4 years. And my mom called me that day, described what had happened, and also described her interaction with the Thousand Oaks Police Department. And the gist of it is they found her at fault for crashing her bike, trying to avoid a pedestrian occupying a bicycle lane, which I immediately said, well, that's ridiculous. There has to be a specific statute that addresses that particular problem, because pedestrians, anyway, Colorado anyway, had no business being in a bicycle lane if there was an adequate facility available for them to occupy. So once I got back into town, I contacted the state police here, or the highway patrol. I called the presiding jurisdiction, which is Woodland Hills office, and I spoke to Trooper Leland Tang, and had a discussion with him about this matter. And he referred me to the state statutes, which I looked up, and I can go into them if you'd like, but clearly Vehicle Code State Statute 21966 states, no pedestrian shall proceed along a bicycle path or lane where there's an adjacent and adequate pedestrian facility. Yet my mom was placed at fault for her crash. She was placed at fault for making an unsafe turn into a curb when she fell into it. Beyond belief. So I took a look at the report, which we went and picked up, and aside from there being a plethora of mistakes in the report itself, which if I had filled out would have been kicked back to me and I would have been standing before my captain, we were rebuffed by the police department. I talked to Sergeant Bennett. Hopefully, I was hoping he would be here so I can address it with him, but he's not. And when I asked the report, absolutely no evidence of any pedestrian involved, no names, no witnesses, nothing. The report was completely wrong. He looked at me and shrugged his shoulders and told me to have a nice day. That was it. So there's a problem there. And the other reason I'm here, obviously, is because of what happened to Mr. Garvin. You have, in this case, a bicyclist being struck down by a motor vehicle coming from behind. Yes, he was within the bicycle lane, but the issue here is this bicycle is trying to avoid pedestrians who are unlawfully occupying a bicycle lane, which when I lived in Westlake, which I had for about 5 years, I used to commute to work 14 miles every day. And I would have to take that route around the lake to get to my job. And I had to deal with this situation on a daily basis. So just some math, because we talk about miles per hour, but if you really put it into perspective in feet per second or velocity, you have a car coming behind you that you can't see. If it is 45 miles an hour, it's almost 65 feet per second. So that kind of puts it more into perspective here, what kind of a velocity we're dealing with. And if you are the bicyclist trying to avoid a pedestrian, half of whom are walking the wrong direction with baby carriages and earphones, they can't hear you coming, you don't have much reaction time. We have an elderly driving community as well. They don't react very well to somebody having to swerve out into the traffic lane to avoid hitting the pedestrian. So I would just, I guess, for my part, I would like to see some type of either education or enforcement effort take place. And I did speak with the state police, and they told me specifically, come over here, go to City Hall, and make a motion for it. And if they refuse to do anything about it, then we'll take it up.
Okay. If you don't mind, your time is up, but one of the commissioners has a question for you.
This is a law that is not widely known by the general public. I learned it myself being on the committee. I had no idea. I jog in the morning, and it's easier on my joints to jog on the asphalt than on the cement sidewalks. But I had no idea. Now that I do know, I'll make a change. Excuse me.
Not known by the police as well.
Excuse me, but the police officer who was on the BAT committee was well aware of it and had said that they don't always ticket, but they always, when they can, they talk to the pedestrian and ask them to move on to the sidewalk. So my question to you is, aside from other educational things that we might want to do, are you looking for signs? What are you looking for exactly?
I guess my suggestion would be, yes, you could put a sign at specific intersections, for example, Triumphal Canyon and Westlake Boulevard, at Agoura Road and Westlake Boulevard, that would instruct the pedestrians at this point, you need to cross the road via a crosswalk, which is provided there, and go to the adjacent facility that is provided for you, which is a sidewalk. It's very simple. And I also understand that the Thousand Oaks Police Department has a bicycle detail. It may behoove the city of Thousand Oaks to assign an officer or 2 officers and have them communicate and talk to the public, to these pedestrians at those intersections, and say, hey, you need to cross the street here. And I think it's a very limited population that does this around Westlake, so I think if you were to address it over 2 weeks, you'd probably solve the problem pretty quickly.
If you don't mind staying there for just a moment more, I know you want to talk, Sergeant Kenny, but Commissioner Lemo has a question.
I just have one other question. Are you aware that you probably need to talk to 2 different jurisdictions, that many of the places you've identified are actually the city of Westlake Village?
Yes.
I'm sorry? Well, L.A., but the city, yeah, the city of Westlake Village in Los Angeles County, right?
Yes, sir, I have, and I also talked to the Traffic Bureau at the L.A. County Sheriff's Department, and they voiced the same concerns and that they would look into it as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sergeant Kenny, would you like to respond, please?
Well, I'm not familiar with the exact with the accident that he's talking about because I deal with the enforcement aspect of our operation. I do know that in most cases where there's a conflict between the bicyclist and a pedestrian, I know that I try to advise the pedestrians if there's a safe location for them to walk, such as a sidewalk, then they should move to that location rather than jog or push their strollers down the middle of the roadway. Like you said, Commissioner, most people are not aware of the law. They just take advantage of it because it is easier for them for what they're doing. So we do try to educate the pedestrians when we do find that issue.
Thank you. Are there any other staff comments to the one public comment that we had? Okay. At this point, we will close the community meeting and start our discussion. Commissioners? Commissioner Price?
I can start?
Yeah, go ahead.
My hat's off to those of you who were part of that committee there. You did a tremendous job and really went well beyond what I would have ever expected. Very good recommendations, and I can certainly sympathize with our last speaker, Mr. Perez there, who voiced some legitimate concerns, and I think that points out the need to move up the education component that's been recommended here. Clearly there are a lot of people in this city that are just unaware, both pedestrians, cyclists as well, and I think that should be one of the things that if I were to recommend moving up, I'd want that to be high on the list of priorities. I've ridden in some of those same areas around the lake, and I have experienced some of the same things. So I also think that that the other recommendations, the Sharrows, that great idea. I'd certainly never thought of it. And heck, I've been in law enforcement for 28 years, so, and quite frankly, I've never seen them. In the city of Los Angeles, we have a huge bicycling population and experience some of the same problems on a much larger scale too. So when you talk about accidents, we've got our fair share out there, but we do have, and I have seen the Hispanic population riding on sidewalks at night, trying to get to and from work, and we just need to educate them, and great recommendations.
Mr. Norman?
Thank you. I want to congratulate the BAT committee, too. I'll take a little bit of a different tack. I wasn't surprised at all. I know a couple of the people on the committee, and I really expected it to be very thorough and was pleased to see that it was. I think you all did a great job. I really appreciated the fact that you seemed to take a look at it with kind of no preconceived notions at all. The only preconceived notion was the original master plan, and that was pretty much it. And I think that was very good. I think that the way we sort of need to look at things is that we've accomplished a lot in 2 years since the master plan came together. So more of accelerating certain things. I tend to think that one of the peripheral benefits of education is it causes awareness of people who don't even know that they're a couple of years away from actually using what we're educating the people who are using it now about, particularly in regards to biking. And so my suggestion would be early on, I would try and direct the city to spending money on outreach and education, and maybe at some point accelerating into a staff level position. Whether you're utilizing the schools, which I think is a great way to get to the younger part of our community, and maybe some of the retail venues. I always think about the way when Alex Fiore wanted to get to people, and we didn't really have a lot of radio stations and a lot of TV stations, he hung outside of Jan's Marketplace with a card table. I'm not suggesting that's the way to do things now, but I think that we have so many retail areas in town and other areas in town that are taking on some of the community outreach. We have the Acorn that is willing to provide space for community outreach, and so we should, I think one of the ways is to educate people. Even though I'm aggravated by bicycle riders that I don't think have a strong connection for all the rules, what I learned tonight was neither do I. I know I'm going to get home and my wife's going to go, really, shouldn't you have known those rules? And I don't think that we all do. So I think education is one thing to accelerate immediately, and then to maybe have a goal of, maybe one full school year of an education timeline where you're really pushing things, and then you immediately follow it up with action. Because after tonight, I mean, I've seen those Sheros in other towns in California, didn't have a clue what they meant. Other than, I just assumed this is the direction the bicyclers are supposed to go. I had no idea that it was to protect them from doors opening. I didn't even realize that was that big of a problem. Coming from back east, there's a lot more parallel parking back there than there is over here. In fact, in Dos Vientos, on Via Ricardo, there's some kind of new lane marking there for the. I've passed that sign a couple of dozen times, and I still don't think I really understand exactly. Are the bikes sharing the same lane as the people that are parking cars? What's going on over there? I think it is confusing, and so, I think education before implementation works out best. That would be my thing. And the other thing I think everybody has to remember is the number one reason that bicyclists don't have the same rights as motorists is in this country that motorists have no rights. Driving is a privilege, and there are just rules that you follow. There's no rights that go along with driving. And I think that that's probably the same thing in regards to being a bicycle rider, is that all of us, myself included, should find out what the rules are before we take that up. I had no idea it was unsafe for bicyclists to ride on the sidewalk. I mean, I can tell you right now, I've gone through 3 sons and really said, I'd prefer if you stay on the sidewalk. So I thank you very much for your work, and those are my comments on what directions we could probably move a little quicker in.
Commissioner McMahon?
I do agree with what you say about highlighting the education first, but I think we need a coordinator. I think we need somebody on staff who will coordinate with the groups, the community groups, with the schools, with the PFAs. If we don't have a point person, I don't see how it will get accomplished. So I think that is one of the most important elements of this, is to direct the education and to make sure that when work is being done, when there's overlays on the streets, that the markings get done within the city and without City Hall. So I really do feel that the coordinator is well worth the money. So.
I think Commissioner McMahon makes a good point in that. That is, we could accelerate this a lot faster with the education that people need to be safer, both from the standpoint of drivers and riders. Having grown up with a bicycle being my main transport, I haven't a clue what today's laws really are because I'm not that much of a rider. However, affecting changes and educating the youths mean that moves forward and we have a safer generation. Maybe a coordinator can find ways that the youth, the young people, can actually educate maybe some of the older ones too. It's probably in a parallel with new traffic laws for drivers that happen all the time. If you haven't taken a driving test for some time, you literally, miss a lot of things that are going on. okay, or accidentally run into them. And I think a coordinator, when it comes to the community and education and making sure that happens in the quickest amount of time so that we don't have incidents and we are a friendlier town and people do utilize this as a better alternative form of transportation, is a very good suggestion. So I thank the committee. I found it very comprehensive, you know, many different aspects. You didn't approach this well, let's just say it's multifaceted, and I'll use fewer words, okay? But thank you for all your time and effort also.
I forgot a little bit of what I was going to say, however. Yeah. I was going down the list of duties and responsibilities for this bicycle advocate or coordinator, and it occurs to me that there's a long list of recommendations here on what that position would do. You know, I don't know that, certainly we can make a recommendation to the council that they make this a position, but I just wonder if I guess a lot of the work has already been done by this committee. They've looked into other cities, things that have worked, things that haven't, and I'm just wondering if we could, trying to think out loud here, well, I'm going to get back to this here, that issue there on the coordinator. I've just lost my train of thought completely. Would you please? And
I have a couple comments, and then I'll go back to Commissioner Price. My son actually goes to school in Davis, and so I've had the opportunity to drive around in Davis quite a bit. And I must say that I didn't actually notice anything different in Davis. There's lots of kids, obviously, riding their bikes to school and back. But it just didn't occur to me. I didn't notice the signage or the things on the roads, and I tend to look for those things. I must say I didn't see them for a Platinum City. It's a small city, and it's they need it because they have a lot of one-way roads and odd things in the city of Davis, and so if they could make it work there, I would think you could make it work almost anywhere. Another comment, I grew up in Orange County, actually in the city of Orange, and we in third grade had to actually get a bicycle license if we were going to ride our bikes on the street. And if you got pulled, checked by a police officer and you didn't have a bicycle license, if you hadn't in fact passed a test that they administered at school, you weren't allowed to ride on the streets. And I recognize that we can't dictate any school curriculum, nor is there room in the curriculum. But I think that working with the school district is really important, not just the PTA volunteer bodies, but the actual governing bodies of the school district and the staff over there to that this coordinator is going to need to work closely with them to implement, talk to district advisory council and school site councils. I know my son wanted to ride his bike desperately with his older brother in first and second grade, and we actually had to drive behind him to take his bike home because he wasn't allowed to lock his bike at the school until third grade. So it's kind of defeated the whole, certainly the green purpose of it, to follow it in our Suburban and bring the bike home. So I think that some work will need to be done and coordinated officially with the cities, and I don't want to dump it on the volunteer organizations of PTAs and PFAs. I think it is something that should be done either in the intergovernmental committee that they have or in some official capacity with staff over there to help the education process and have it be something that is real and not one PFA picks it up, one PTA picks it up, and another one doesn't, that it's something that's uniform across the city so that it's more reliable and dependable to keep the kids safe. I mean, even just watching some of them ride with their bike helmets back here or hanging or flopping just makes me insane. So that would be my one recommendation, that we don't lay it off on the volunteer organizations at the schools, but make it a more official cooperative effort. The pedestrians in the bike lane sounds like an issue. I did in fact know that you're not supposed to be in bike lanes, but I know that particularly in some of the areas over in Westlake, Valleyfield, et cetera, there's no sidewalks, and so in those cases, I kind of want to know what no one seemed to address what the best course of action might be in those areas where there is no safe place for the pedestrians. What signage, what helps best for safety in that area? So I'd be curious about that, and maybe you can help me.
What I did learn is that the law applies only if there is an adjacent walkway for pedestrians. So if there isn't, then all bets are off, and the bicyclists and the pedestrians share the pathway.
No, I get that. I just didn't know if there are any recommendations for safety in that circumstance. They seemed like there was a very thorough recommendations on almost everything except that particular situation, which seems to be very problematic. That there are streets. Thousand Oaks seems like a lot of streets that don't have sidewalks on them, and so I think that signage to cross the street, that is something that a pedestrian needs to do, and education is important. But I also didn't hear any recommendations of what to do in that particular circumstance. So, not to give you guys more work to do, but maybe just to think about.
I think I did, and I actually, as I was sitting here, I think I convinced myself, or maybe my fellow commissioners convinced me even more for the need for this person on staff, because there's so much work to do. And again, I'm reading down the list here, and without somebody doing it full time and spearheading it, it's just not likely to happen. And it's less likely to happen in a timely manner. And I think that it's important that we do get it done. And the positive outcome here is that we might encourage other people to get out there on their bicycles and reduce pollution and just traffic as well, just making it a better city to live in. I wanted to ask the Sergeant Kenny there, I'll call him by his real name, does Ventura County Sheriff's or TOPD have its own bike safety program that they do at the elementary schools, or is that something that's been lost in the budget?
I'm not 100% sure. I know that we have put on, in conjunction with other civic groups, what we call bike rodeos, which are educational for younger children as far as the rules of the road. That would come under our community services, DARE, and that type of group, and that's something I could look into a little bit further.
Okay, thank you. I also like the idea of the bike fair, and I don't want to lose sight of the fact that while sure we need to educate the kids, we also need to educate the driving public. They're a significant part of the potential problem. I won't call them the problem, but potential problem, as are the adult riders. So, we don't want to lose sight of that, and we need to market to them as well. I think the website is an outstanding idea. It's a great vehicle for communicating information to the citizens of our city. And again, I think it's all of that points out the need to have somebody on staff that would do this, and I don't know that there's somebody sitting around with 4 or 5 hours of their day that's not already busy. So, no, she's shaking her head no. It's not you.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry to keep adding, but I learned so much from this experience. One other thing I learned that I did not know was that there's this whole community of people who actually commute to work, like Dave. There's so many of them, and I'm not ready to do that, but I really appreciate all of you who are not in cars and can do that and get to work safely, and one more person not on the freeway. I think that's awesome. And if we can make it safer for those people who do commute by bicycle, if we could make them more visible to drivers and educate drivers that they're there and be aware of them and they're helping our community in small but significant ways, I think that this is a great thing. And so I just want to express my appreciation to them, and I want to do anything I can to make their lives a little bit easier. So,
are we ready to make a motion? Do we have more discussion? Okay, we have no more discussion. Is someone ready to make a motion? If there's, I suppose we can, if we need to split off item 18 as a separate, that's the big money item, so.
I'd like to take a swing at motion. Actually, two. First motion would be to move to accept staff's recommendation through item 17.
Okay, we have a motion to accept staff recommendations and BAT recommendations through item 17. Is there any discussion?
can I ask for a friendly amendment, or just an addition to your, on item 2A, where it talks about installing sharrows and other signs? Perhaps we can have the city look into signs that indicate that pedestrians should use sidewalks and not the bicycle lane.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Okay.
Do you have that, Mrs. Bravo?
Can I make some clarification on the staff report? On page 8 of the agenda is the staff report, and there's under BAT recommendation it's listed 1 and 2, and then there's A, B, and C under number 2. And then attached to the staff report is a separate document which was prepared by the BAT, and that one's titled Thousand Oaks Bicycle Advisory Team Presentation of the Thousand Oaks Traffic Commission, April 18th. And I just want to make sure you don't, I think that's where somebody got the number 18 out of it. So I think the recommendations are on page 8, and that's...
Okay, we're going to correct the motion.
I'm sorry, you're right. It will be, my motion would be to accept the BAT recommendation number 1, concur with recommending to City Council the approval, item number 2, which is concurring with the recommend to approve, recommend the City Council to approve the BAT's recommendations A and B, and to add Commissioner McMahon's amendment to that, just leaving out letter C.
So, Mrs. Bravo, I believe the motion is to take staff recommendation 1, 2, A, and B, and additionally to A would be to add pedestrian signs stating where they may not walk in bike lanes. Is there any further discussion, Commissioners? Okay, please vote.
Chairman King?
Yes.
Vice Chair Lemo?
Yes.
Commissioner Gregory?
Yes.
Commissioner McMahon?
Yes.
Commissioner Price?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
And I want to explain why I wanted that as a separate. When I read this over and listened and read it over again, it seemed that we were sending something to council that all they could do was kick back with many questions. We've got a range of 60,000 to 450,000 annually, and nothing specific. And so what my next motion is going to be is, in regards to the BAT recommendation C, as quickly as is practical, for staff to recommend some levels with a timeline, and because I agree with my fellow commissioners that things will move faster if there's a person hands-on tomorrow afternoon. I absolutely agree with that. But I don't feel comfortable making a recommendation to council on something that's a budget item like this with absolutely no clarity at all. And so and maybe this is something that we have to, tablespoon feed them. But my suggestion would be if we can have staff come back, maybe as early as the next meeting, but I really don't know what your workload is like, as soon as possible, to say, here are some plans. Here's a way to get started. Here's a way to move it up. And here's how it may parallel some of the plans from the master plan with dollars and cents. And when you feel comfortable that that gives council a footprint, we go from there. So my motion would be for staff to revisit letter C with some specifics, both financial specifics and timeline specifics, and bring it back for us to take a quick look at as soon as practical, and then hopefully moving on to council.
Commissioner Price?
My concern would be that the other recommendation that we just voted on is going to be difficult to implement without having first decided whether or not we can create the position of a bicycle coordinator. I just throw that out there as a discussion item because I think it necessarily, in order for those other things, sure, the staff can come up with a timeline, but it's going to require, particularly with the education component, it's going to require that person making up a lot of literature to get out to the community. So I almost think that the council first needs to take a look at the feasibility of employing somebody in that position, and then deciding what the timeline is going to be for implementation of the other recommendations.
Commissioner McMahon?
I would think that if we made this recommendation to create and fund a bicycling coordinator advocate position, that our staff, when they presented it to the city council, would give them an idea of what they would expect it to be and what they would need. And I think that could be worked out with the city council. And I think we're just making a recommendation that they do it to what degree they feel is necessary. And I think that they can handle that. So I would vote no on that. I think we need to recommend that advocate to go along with our original motion.
Commissioner Gregory?
Yeah, this is all good input. I'm going to share mine. Commissioner Lemo makes a good point, and that is we will get council's approval possibly faster by coming up with options, cost options of recommending someone, and that may be based on X number of hours a month at a annual cost of option 1, option 2, option 3, or whatever you find is feasible. That way, when we present it, yes, they will either say yes or no, but their next decision would be having a finite cost, which they need to find in the budget. And I think we would get closer to approval, presenting, quantitative recommendations for that. We might not get the ideal choice initially because of budget constraints, but we may get a choice under those circumstances. So my recommendation would simply be is that we do present that we feel that a bicycling coordinator would meet the criteria and benefit the community and get to the end result faster, and we recommend these options hopefully for council's consideration.
Commissioner Lemo?
Being on a diet, almost everything I do nowadays is an analogy with food. And I just don't think you can eat this pie all at one time. First of all, I believe that there are things that can be implemented. Don't take this the wrong way, but tomorrow afternoon, things that we have a process in place for, that will certainly do a better job with education along with them. But things that can take place, I mean, a lot of things have taken place around without any pre-education already. And so I'd like to get as much buy-in from City Council as we have here, so that it's not a question of if there's going to be a coordinator position. It's what level we're going to do this year, next year, and the next year, especially when you have a council and the city manager that are focusing on budget right now, and will be through June. The one thing that I'm concerned about is that as an advisory committee, many of us get phone calls from City Council going, what did you mean by this, or what was your question about this? And the only time we really have a problem is when we answer, I don't know. And in regards to a staff position tonight, I'd have to answer, I don't know. What's that person going to do? Well, everything. Take a look at all. Well, what does that mean? I mean, I know in business I can't go and get a staff person who's going to do everything. But as soon as I focus it down to 1 or 2 things and not 10 things, and I say this is what the responsibilities are going to be the first 12 months, and after a review they're going to be doing this, and maybe we'll have a total of 3 staff people over 5 years, it's more likely to get approved. And so it's for those reasons that I think we can and should move council to move forward on this. And also keep in mind that by the time this gets on the council agenda, we're still moving forward with our request to get the practical information about a staff position. And so that's why I broke it out the way I did. It's not about not believing in the position or, quite frankly, the need for the position, but I'd rather see it happen than to be debated a lot longer than it needs to be.
Can staff give us any input, guidance on this particular thing we're batting around out here? Would you go to City Council with recommendations on the what the position would be like and describe it for them? Is that, you gave us your recommendations, and you usually know kind of how you're going to go to council with them, and so what were you thinking with regard to item 2C?
As Commissioner Lamo pointed out, the council's about ready to begin a long budget process, and this recommendation tonight most likely won't be going to the City Council until the end of May. So, and that budget process is going to begin in the middle of May with the council. It's already begun with staff for the last several months, but it'll become more intensified then in the middle of May, far before this recommendation is going to go to the City Council. So we don't know what impact that's going to have, other than asking for a new position at this point in the game is going to be asking for a lot from them. So we can do that at your direction, but it may be too late. So what we'll do is put together what you want us to do. If you want us to go back and study a new position again and more intensely, we'll do that. Or we can go with what you've got tonight and put that all together in one recommendation that would go probably the end of May, May 29th, I believe.
Well, Sharon, do you mind reading that?
I did want to point out, Commissioner Lemo, in the paragraph on page 8, financial impact, if you go to the end of the paragraph, which is actually on the next page, funding of the position on page 9, the very top, and $125,000 operating budget should be discussed at the May 15th City Council budget study session. So, in fact, I believe we have guidance. It isn't that wide range that you were concerned about, of the $60,000 to $450,000.
I'd like to get some clarification from staff. I think it actually is. I think it's funding of the position and $125,000 operating budget. So the the staff positions with 2 or 3 full-time and their operating budget is inside the range of $60,000 to $450,000. So I guess what you could say is, if you took the $125,000 out of the $450,000, which is the high mark, it would be $60,000 to $275,000.
For 2 or 3, and we're asking for 1.
Do we know what that number is for 1?
I think if you read the whole paragraph there, they're just talking about the other outreach programs that are within Public Works. It's recycling and stormwater, and they're giving you the range there. I do now understand what Commissioner Lemel is saying, is that if we make a recommendation to council that we create this position, we haven't really given much direction on what it is we want to see out of this position in the short term, and then 2 years from now.
I'd like to look at it in 2 ways, but I want to ask a question first. Mr. Hallowell, knowing the process as well as you do, is it safe to assume that if we get the recommendation that's already been approved by the commission for the items 1 and items 2A and B to council by the 15th, that those things that are certainly outside of what's within the budget parameters of the now existing 2005 master plan, those can begin being budgeted, even though the personnel is not? I guess what I'm saying is, if we had to work with city council and they had to work with their staff to figure out over the next 4 to 6 months how that comes to fruition in a person, at least the work portion of it, if you will, the non-new staff person is in process. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes, it would be probably a better chance of success getting a line item approved for a program than there would be to get a new position created. There may be a possibility of reclassifying existing positions that haven't been filled. That's another option, but as we sit here tonight, I don't think we can really speak on that. We don't have any details.
Okay, and so that's why my motion stands the way that it does, is that my goal is not to have everybody be satisfied with the result of their hard work tonight, because it's just not, the result of your hard work is going to be over the next 10 years. What I would like to have happen is that we leave here tonight with a practical plan, and the responsibility is on council to be able to say, okay, for 2/3 or 75% of that, we have all the information we need to make a decision. And we're going to have a date certain, council will, not us, when they're going to be able to have staff have brought something back. We understand one position, we make a recommendation to them, and we move forward. It might be 2 months, it might be 3 months, it might be whenever staff sees it's done, but at least we're moving forward. So that's why I really leave the motion as it sets and suggest maybe we can vote on it.
If I can just add one more comment before you take that vote. We can't guarantee that any recommendation you make tonight is going to make it to the May 15th City Council meeting, because that is a study session meeting, and usually they don't want to clutter the meeting with other items. They want to concentrate on that, on the study session, so it's most likely it'll be the end of May.
I understand that. Thank you.
I will vote for your motion, Commissioner. I realize that you are trying to do this in a practical way. I just want to make sure that at some point we do propose this coordinator position and follow through on it. That's all.
Would it speed up the process, Mr. Halliwell, if we recommend the staff position, then it goes to council, and they may ask you for more information to bring back to them? In fact, I would imagine that they would, to justify it. Does it slow it down by having you bring it back to us, or speed it up? I mean, as opposed to council's going to ask you probably the same questions that we're asking. What's this person going to do? What's the job description going to look like? So if we make the recommendation that we think there should be a person in this coordination position, which I think there should be to get all this work done, do we slow it down by having you bring it back to us for a formal recommendation, or by if we send it to council with a full recommendation and they ask the question, is that a faster process? In your opinion, I recognize you don't have a crystal ball.
Yes, and also we hardly ever do this, so we don't know what the outcome could be. We do know that new positions are tight and there are a lot of restrictions, but it probably would be smoother to take the entire recommendation at one time and not come back to you and take it right to the city council to try to get it in there under the whole process some way, at least, even if it'll be a few weeks later than the discussion of the operating budget, and see if it's possible to get the position in. Because ideally it would be good to have a budget item for the operating portion of it already in the budget, but if that's not possible and we aren't able to create a new position, we can come back during the budget cycle with special reports to the city council asking them to appropriate the money after the budget had been approved. So we're kind of at the deadline of the new budget being approved, which will be this June, and that'll go for a 2-year period. But during that 2-year period, we could come back and ask them to appropriate and also ask them to spend those appropriated funds on projects that we think are appropriate. We being City Traffic Commission after they review the report.
All right. Well, go ahead.
I certainly understand Commissioner Lemo's reason for wanting to separate these two now. I think we would rather make sure that something is done rather than nothing. So I think he's separated those two items, and I'm just wondering if there was even a need to do that, to go to the council with two separate recommendations. I think what you're suggesting is that it could have all been in one, and they can choose to accept whatever they accept and dismiss what they, the big ticket item, the personnel issue. Is that? I guess it really won't make a difference, though, if we do it this way now.
Well, it does. It makes a difference to me, and I'll tell you what my concern is. I feel that the report is so comprehensive that we're passing something on to council that they, at any point in time, I won't even try and have a crystal ball, they can rule on it. I don't feel comfortable forwarding the recommendation for a staff position to council because there's more questions than there are answers. There's not enough specifics. So by breaking them out, we don't have everything whenever it gets to them, we don't have everything getting kicked back. They realize how important it is. They realize a sense of urgency. They realize the amount of work that's been done and the practical solutions that have been offered in a well-thought-out plan. We would hope that common sense would rule that personnel is going to be needed to make this happen, and we're just getting the facts and figures on how that personnel works. So that's why I wanted to split it out.
I have a comment. To me, that what I'm hearing tonight is that the bicycle advisory team is telling us that there is this bicycle master plan, and good things could happen, but there needs to be a guiding force on staff in the city. And I don't think, in my opinion, that we need to describe what that position is exactly, but to simply recommend that there is this person that exists and go for the recommendation in full, as Mr. Helliwell suggests, give a full recommendation of all of these points, and that having a point person within the city is one of the most important factors in getting all of the other things to happen. And I think one of the more salient points that Mr. Helliwell said is that it's up to council to figure out how it fits in budget, whether they're going to reallocate someone that, maybe do whatever they need to do. But I think without our recommendation that a person needs to be the guiding person to make sure that there is action and that there is coordination with the schools and that there is, I mean, like I said, we cannot have this fall to volunteers. It's just too difficult. It's too comprehensive. And I think there needs to be a point person within the city. And I don't think that there's, it is a very comprehensive report, but I think the council will understand the difference between the things that staff can do as it exists and the things that can happen with the position added to it. And so I really think that the position is critical to this moving forward.
Could I ask that the motion be restated? I'm not quite sure what it is at this point.
We have voted on a motion for all of the items except for that. So I think the first thing that we would have to do would be a motion to reconsider and withdraw that motion and start all over. If we really feel that there is a consensus to roll it all into one. So I think the first thing you need to do is judge if you want to do a motion to reconsider, then try and roll it all in at one. I could not support either of those two because I think we make a big mistake of going to council with a well thought out plan and one element missing. But that may just be my feeling. So I think there are no specifics in the staff person and no specific timelines either, because I obviously don't think we're going to have this department end up where it needs to end up as you go through a timeline. That's going to grow on its own. But we don't even have a starting point. We have a person who's going to sit there and take care of that list. We don't have a consultant's report of what that's going to take. We have literally nothing. And I think, with all due respect to our city council, that the question mark will delay the process rather than get the process going and we give them a plan for filling that in. But the first thing that needs to be done would be a motion to reconsider the motion that's already passed.
If we were to decide to have a motion to reconsider, you don't feel that you could, in your clever way, Commissioner Lemo, you're very clever, and
we've been talking to my wife.
You don't think that you could craft a motion to where it would be, our recommendation would be that, look, we want this portion to go forward, and we don't want it to be stalled because of this high dollar or high ticket item, this staff person who may or may not be able to be hired. You're so eloquent.
I don't think I'm that clever. but I also have to say, well, I know that I'm not that clever. Let me put it that way. I guess where I'm going with all this is, what ultimately is going to happen is that staff is going to come up with a variety of solutions that they're going to suggest to council, and they may be timed with this. But because we're as involved as we are, I'd like to take a look at them. I'd like to see what it is we're trying to convince council to do, and I'd also not like to be in a position that when one or two, or in the case of this city council, 3, separately come up to us and say, so what'd you think about this, or what was your idea when you were coming up with this? I would say I have no idea. I'm waiting for staff. I'd rather let them know right up front, we want this moved forward. And I'm saying that, for want of a better term, the public works versus that we don't know what the department is. We know that certain things can happen on the road, certain signs can go up. The education can't be at the level we want because we need a person to implement that and do that outreach into the community. But something gets done tonight. A relatively quick 6 months after this second phase got started. So that's why I asked to put them as 2 separate motions.
I guess perhaps we're not communicating on the same level here, and you are still saying that you want to make a second motion.
Yeah, but I'm not going to make a second motion until we find out if the first motion's going down, and then I'm just going to say, okay. I made the second motion. We haven't voted on it yet.
Right, and that's what I think we asked for clarification.
Do you guys remember what that was? It seemed like it was yesterday.
We have a
I think the
stenographer.
second motion was, the way I understood the second motion when I made it, was that for the BAT recommendation 2C, that staff would gather input, basically from anywhere you feel it's necessary on a practical basis, to make a recommendation of here's the staff person that's needed in the first 6, 10, 18 months, whatever, and here's what we estimate that cost to be, with load and everything. I'm talking about, the Social Security, every benefit, whatever. And here's where that position can come to fruition. They may be able to, City Council may be able to look at this and go, you know what, we have a person over here who is in a department where those needs have diminished because we don't have as much going on, and we'll move them over to it. That's happened with Youth Commission and other staff positions. So is my motion changed at all since we made it? Sandy, you're up.
You did say that you wanted to revisit letter C, which is the create and fund a bicycling coordinator advocate position with specific timelines with all costs associated.
That's it.
I also may add that you said you wanted us to return as soon as was practical.
Yes,
So
I did.
That could be a while, because this could be a long report.
I understand, but if it's a while for us, it's a long while for council, too.
Commissioner Gregory, you've been quiet for a little while. Jump in here.
Thank you. I'm trying to absorb all this, and you can see we have no influence over money, only making recommendations. But as part of Commissioner Lemo's recommendation, he did ask a question, which I thought staff responded to. So this is my synopsis of it. I think they said that it was a timing issue, is they could not get back in any feasible time with a finite recommendation and or recommendations for this position for it to even be considered for this budget year because of the process that is going on and the timeline we are currently on, and that we might stand a better recommendation of just adopting it as is and then letting them come and find possibly what kind of budget they may be able to come up with if they approve of this position to fund it this year. So although both points have validity, what I'm hearing from staff is that we stand a better chance at this time and point of being vague and not coming up with finite, and that just making the recommendation part, or they may come back then to staff and say, give us a realistic dollar amount that we could consider and or set aside for this unknown person at this time. So I see your point, Commissioner Lemo. I see the other commissioners' points too. My own perspective is to err on the staff side of the timeline that's currently going on, and that by leaving it as an all-inclusive right now at this time and point, we might stand a better chance of getting it approved in this budget cycle. And that's just my personal point of view right now.
Okay, we're honing in here. Commissioner McMahon.
I am going to agree with you, and I think that if we make it somewhat vague, then the council can make it what they like. If we make it vague to create and fund a bicycling coordinating position and leave it at that, the council can interpret it however they want to make it work. They can interpret it as bring this guy over from this department. They can interpret it as fund a whole new full-time job. They can interpret it as whatever they want to make it work. If we give them too many specifics, then it's a yay or a nay. Boom, that's it. So at this point, I'm leaning against Commissioner Lemo's second motion.
Commissioner Price.
Thank you. If it were presented to the City Council as one recommendation, all-inclusive, would they have an opportunity to see the same presentations that we've seen tonight, or perhaps a little shorter version of it? I'm not making any value judgments there, but Mr. Hallowell, he's trying to figure out how to turn the mic on.
I think whether you break up the motion into two parts or go as one part, it's probably so far into the budget process that it may be too much to handle during this budget cycle. It's just how I see it, and we will present it with full enthusiasm as you want us to, but I think realistically that's probably what we're looking at, and we're just going to have to look at this for the next cycle. Because on the 15th, which is a very short period from now, and everything on that study session has to be done today. Now it has to be finished and and approved for all that material they're going to be looking at, and the whole draft budget is all at that point, the way I understand it, and that's how they're going to be looking at it in a couple of weeks. And then after that, they're going to look at it again for the final approval. There may be enough time to get this in here, but we cannot promise it because this is a huge thing to ask for at this point in the game, is to ask for a new position and a new budget program.
My reason for asking that question is if the City Council, and I recognize it's not going to be on the 15th, maybe on the 29th, it may be in June. But when they do get a chance to take a look at our recommendations, if they were to view the presentation as it was presented to us tonight, they might be able to form their own opinions as to whether or not this particular staff position is necessary, and then maybe they would, as Commissioner Lemo suggests, find somebody else who was already on staff who might be able to at least commit a few hours a week to it, and maybe get some of it done. So that was the reason that I asked the question. So would they see this presentation whenever it makes it to their agenda?
It's not likely to be on the 15th because that's a study session and there wouldn't be any presentations on that day. On the 29th is a time when there would be this recommendation would go probably as a committee report, staff-supported committee report, and then at that point they would be able to give a presentation, just like they did tonight, probably streamlining it because most reports are very brief. So I can see that happening, but then we're not the final approval on what goes on the agenda on a particular day, so there has to go through many more screenings by others, and a lot of things could happen in between. So whatever your recommendation is, we'll schedule it as soon as practical.
Thank you. I understand the limitations there.
If I can make a comment, this is staff's recommendation to us, was to recommend 1, 2, A, B, and C, and it's been my experience that staff presents their recommendations to council, and then if we have presented a different recommendation, they also present this. So my understanding of how the protocol has always worked with us is that staff would recommend 1, 2, A, B, and C. That's their recommendation, and then they would say, however, the Traffic Commission has pulled off C and said they want more information on that. And I just don't see the value in that. I see the value in following staff recommendations, going forward with it all, and leaving it to council to ask the questions that we all know need to be asked, but that they know that we feel that this coordinator advocate position is important to moving forward and keeping our streets safe and traffic safe, which is kind of what we're here to do. And council is the one that is there to appropriate money and determine what they're going to fund and what they're not going to fund, in my opinion.
Yeah, yes, please. Mr. Hallowell, the recommendations that are in this report, a good many of them are either in the master plan or accelerations of the master plan, and things that, relatively speaking, except for the employee, are more run-of-the-mill in budget. There's nothing that's extraordinary in the budget in your original recommendation, is there? Excluding the employee.
The original recommendations being the original master plan? Is that what you mean? Or are the ones that are in this report?
The new employee related recommendations that you've made seem to be signage, street signage, street markings. They're not a heavy dollar volume level of expense. The heaviest part of expense here is the employee and the education materials and things to make people aware of it. Is that correct?
Yes, I think we estimated that the operational aspects of this recommendation are $125,000, and then the budgeted position, we don't know what that would be yet. And these are actually our summation of the BAT's recommendations.
Right. I mean, at some
They're not
point,
staff recommendations.
we've got to be done. And so I just want to make sure that I make it perfectly clear where I'm coming from in this. I don't think it's practical to have everything to be held up. If there's any things in this report that can move forward as part of the process, just by getting council to sign off on it, that's why I have the position that I have. But it seems like we have consensus to reconsider the first motion and move forward. So by all means, let's, as the maker of the last motion, I'm done. Let's do what we can to move the process forward tonight.
So are you rescinding your second motion?
No, let's let it fail.
Okay.
I want to be on the record.
Okay, and I just want to, Mr. Halliwell, you just said something that was important, and I want to make sure we understand it. You said these are BAT recommendations, so we have a report in front of us tonight with no staff recommendations.
Well, we're supportive of the recommendation.
Okay,
but
just
it was
when-
the BAT team committee that put this together. It wasn't staff that put it together.
Correct, but this is staff concurs with these recommendations.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll vote on that, Commissioner Lemo's second motion.
We'll go this way. Commissioner Price?
No.
Commissioner McMahon?
No.
Commissioner Gregory?
No.
Vice Chair Lemo?
Yes.
Chair McKay?
No.
Motion fails 4-1.
Okay, Commissioner McMahon.
I move that we take item 2C and add that to the recommendation that we approved a few minutes ago and just lump it all in together.
Any discussion on that? Mrs. Bravo? Which one of us do you want?
I'm sorry, what?
You said Chair McMahon, so I don't know.
Oh, jeez. I'm not used to this yet. Chair McKay? Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Vice Chair Lemo?
No.
Commissioner Gregory?
Yes.
Commissioner McMahon?
Yes.
Commissioner Price?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Thank you for your patience, Mrs. Bravo, and everybody else. All right, I'm going to throw my water on the floor and. Okay. Status report of prior Traffic Commission recommendations. The Silas Avenue abandonment to City Council goes on April 24th. Commission referrals from March 21st, the attached report. Traffic Commission comments. Is there anything more anyone would like to say this evening?
Well, not when you put it
When I made it really welcome, right?
I would like to bring something up that we brought up in the last meeting, but one of the commissioners was absent, so we delayed it. And this meeting was kind of a prime example of these late meetings and how people's minds fade at this hour after a very long day. And it was brought to our attention that there is no lock on having these meetings at 7:30 starting time, and that the commission could make requests from the council to change the start time on our meetings. And I'd like to open that up for discussion on other commissioners. Myself, anytime from 6 o'clock on is fine.
Yeah, I thought I asked for that to be on the agenda just in case the public had any comment on that. Do we need it to be on the agenda, or can we just discuss this and vote on it tonight when we have a full panel here?
It is on the agenda, item number 10.
Wake up. Oh, review traffic commission start time. Good morning. Good evening. This is that late time brain fade. Yeah, we're at 10. We got there. Did I breeze through? Because, he brought it up under traffic commissioner comments, so now we get to 10, which is reviewing our traffic commission start time. Is there any other comments?
I have a quick comment. When I budgeted my year, other than other city councils from other jurisdictions which interfere with my attendance from time to time, 7:30 is usually the easiest time for me to make. If we can be flexible with our voting, and if you want to start at 7, I can't make it literally any moment before 7, and most likely 7:30. But if we can move it up to 7 and not vote on items before 7:30, I'm able to deal with that. But I'm sort of socked in at 7:30 at least through the end of this year.
Anybody? Commissioner McMahon?
As much as I'd like to see him much earlier, I think it's unfair to change the rules in the middle of the game for Commissioner Lemo. So I guess if we can only move it up to 7 and be fair to him, I think that's what we should do.
Go ahead.
I would miss Commissioner Lemo, so I'm all for leaving.
You're just being nice.
I would go with whatever the balance of the commission decides.
I agree with Commissioner McMahon that earlier would be much better, but I don't think we should change, in the middle that someone can't plan for it, and some of us are busy, and some of us work in different places. So if we can, I think, though, you asked us not to vote before 7:30, which is we have had 10-minute meetings. We've had, with me, we had a 15-minute meeting. So I don't think we can say that we won't vote on anything before 7:30. I think we can only say, that we're going to move the start time to 7 and hope that, looking at the agenda, you can maybe try and get here at 7. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, you brought up a point. I don't command my own schedule. Between my assistant and my wife, they schedule it, and my BlackBerry tells me where to go. Because we work with 3 other cities, one of which has their council meetings on some Wednesday nights, I'm able to sway council meetings to usually to nights we don't have, but I'm usually en route on our wonderful traffic system. So I'm done working whenever I need to be, but traffic usually gets me here just in the nick of time, much as it does tonight. So that's my challenge. Is I really, I can plan on 7:30. If you leave an hour from here at 6:30, you're under the radar on most traffic. but earlier than that makes it harder for me to get here. But so that my problem is, I think I can probably make it by 7 a lot of the time, but 7:30 is where I'm sort of stuck, just till the end of this year.
Typically, when we have something, I'm going to say important, searching for a better word, really pressing, a big action item, we typically have public comments and a lengthy report, and I just would hope that you could get here to not miss any of the reports, because to vote appropriately, you need to hear the full reports. And so I think we can entertain looking at a 7 o'clock start with the hope that you can get here. I would just, if it's not successful, I would like to revisit it and push it back, because we need a full panel here and full information to vote. So.
Gosh, with the frog in my throat, I make the motion that we request that we move up our meetings to 7 p.m. With the understanding that if Commissioner Lemo finds future difficulty that we cannot work through, that we can adjust this time back to the 7:30 time frame.
I don't think it's a flexible time. I just think we would vote again, put it back on the agenda and vote again if it's not working. The motion is to set it at 7.
Yeah,
This traffic commission is set by resolution, which states in the resolution that the meeting times start at 7:30. What we would have to do is change the meeting time, and then we would also have to make sure with TOTV and that make sure the room wasn't booked, etc.
You know, it
Yes,
sounds
we
like
have a time that's a time certain, that we start on that time, because we've got so many people who have to coordinate to have this room happen and all the electronics and everything, and the city clerk and the noticing and et cetera. So
my motion simply is then that 7 o'clock is the meeting time that we change our meetings to.
Any discussion?
I guess not.
Mrs. Bravo?
I want to do a hand vote. All those in favor of a 7 o'clock meeting start time? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. No engineering comments, so then we are adjourned to 7 o'clock on Wednesday, May 16th, here in the boardroom. Whoop, whoa, I'm sorry. No, we're not. We are... Oh, I'm sorry.
yes, we actually have to amend the resolution first, which will take a couple of months to do that. So we'll have to adjourn to 7:30, and then we'll let you know.
Okay, you'll let us know what time we can come here.
Yes.
All right, so then we'll adjourn to 7:30 on May 16th, and you'll get back to us when we might be able to change. Thank you. Good night.